Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands we're joining from today.
I'm joining from Lisarow on the lands of the Darkinjung people.
And I am joining from the lands of the Nyungbul people of the Bundjalung Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. We acknowledge their deep and ongoing connection to land, waters, language and culture, and recognise that sovereignty was never ceded. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Before we jump into this episode, a quick note on why we make Femmebot. Kat and I run Crybaby Productions, a creative agency working with enterprise brands. We help marketing teams turn complex products into stories and campaigns that actually drive growth. We started Femmebot because we kept meeting incredible women leading in tech. We wanted to create a space to share their thinking and leadership.
Kate Armstrong-Smith is the co-founder and co-CEO of Athelia Technologies, a company reimagining how stories are created and handled through intelligent technology that elevates, not replaces, which is important, human creativity. For more than 2 decades, she has worked at the intersection of narrative design, creative production, and emerging technology across film, television, theatre, and immersive media, collaborating with organisations including TED and Sydney Festival and the Sydney Opera House, a Churchill Fellow recognised for her work in cultural innovation and new digital formats. Kate now works with studios, governments and universities around the world to help creatives navigate the rapidly evolving relationship between storytelling and AI. We are so excited to have you on the podcast, Kate, because you are straddling both creative and tech, and we either have one or the other. So we're super excited to speak to you. Welcome to Femmebot.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here too. I love that you're a fellow. That always sounds very impressive. I don't really know what it actually means, but it feels like super important. So can you give us a bit of a rundown into your career and, what's brought you to this present day?
Yeah, absolutely. So my career for the last 20 to 25 years has been focused on creating story-based works. So I actually started my kind of career. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do science and medicine or to do theatre. I actually really, really wanted to work in the theatre. And when I was 18, I was in France and I got the amazing privilege of working in an opera, in the old, 400-year-old opera. And I got to experience the art form of performance and all of the ways that we as people all gather around, and huge groups of people, from stage managers to lighting people to costume people that have traditions that span hundreds of years, would gather and use the same kind of workflows that they did 400 years ago to create these incredible productions. And I had the privilege of working with those kind of productions from early on, and I really just loved how performers and audiences connect. So I have spent my career, I decided to work in entertainment, even though I've got kind of a tech kind of I studied medicine, but then I decided to continue working in entertainment. So I guess that's where my kind of tech or the practice of the technology came in later on, now that I work in Othelia with my team. But the true passion that I've been able to, I guess, work throughout my career is being able to support performers, tell their stories and connect with audiences. Now, I happen to be doing that at a time when there was huge disruption in the industry. When I started, there was no Facebook or social media just a few years before then. And then that hit. And what happened is young people, I noticed the people my age were starting to move away from the arts and were no longer interested in stories. So that's where I got my Churchill Fellowship. I actually said, well, look, we've got to follow the people and we've got to look at these new formats. And so from the very beginning of Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, MySpace, I was kind of going, okay, well, there seems to be new formats coming and how does that work? So while I was working as a producer, while I was working in festivals and managing artists and writers and working, in that way, I was also trying to work out how these amazing creatives and storytellers could also work and, try new formats, because I was really worried that the that the amazing storytellers and creators would be stuck in one format and not be able to connect. Just happened to be, I think, on the money with that, because the next 50 years, like the whole content creator economy exploded. We've had like the metaverse, and then not the metaverse. We've had virtual reality. We've had webisodes. I mean, I was there when there was only movies and TV shows and books and theatre. And
magazines.
Now we've got, and magazines. Oh yeah. I really miss Dolly.
Hey, that was my first job. That was my first job. My first freelance gig, I could say. Wasn't it the best?
Section. I have teenage daughters, and there was no, I was like, right, I'm going to get Dolly so they can read the sealed section, and
oh my
gone.
God, I was forbidden. Those sealed sections, I was forbidden, but they were so good, weren't they?
They were so good.
Amazing.
That's right. And so I have teenage daughters, and their life from a media and story and point of view is so different. They don't know what live TV is. They consume all of their content. I'd hope to say just on Netflix and on SVOD, but actually a lot of their narrative content and culture is being engaged in between, before TikTok was shut down, but very much the streaming and the YouTube and these kind of short kind of pieces of information, and that's how they're connecting
like
with
YouTube
story.
Shorts. And were they watching 100%. Coachella? Were they watching Coachella on the weekend? I mean, that was like live, wasn't it? So that's kind of live TV.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And we were like talking about Sabrina Carpenter and what it means and feminisms. And I was, do we love Bieber's YouTube kind of antics? I loved it. I thought it was really
a
meta. Yeah. But, of course, it was very cheap production value for him. So, yeah. So in summary, I've had the privilege, I guess, of seeing all these amazing ways we engage in culture be completely disrupted. And that was something we were thinking about way before ChatGPT came, way before this idea of AI was hitting creativity. When about 8 or 9 years ago, I decided to get my master's in a screen business at AFTRS, because I thought, this was not going away. I wanted to really understand the screen business side of it, because we were really moving online. And at that point, my co-founder, who I met in the theatre, was a writer, director. He had the idea that the story was actually a system. It wasn't the idea of the hero's journey. We were all very obsessed with it, but it just wasn't working with these new Netflix shows. You'd watch something and, you'd get to the 5th or 6th episode and it just didn't work. It didn't have the right tension. The big moment like 10, 12 years ago was when Game of Thrones was around and it was on, and, it was a group experience. It was before, TikTok and Instagram had kind of really diversified the audiences, and Spotify. It was just at the beginning of Instagram and everyone was watching and commenting together. And the last series didn't have book material. It was written by TV writers based on the material, on the book. And it just didn't have the same kind of richness to it.
Yeah, it didn't have the depth, or it just felt much more one-dimensional, didn't it?
Yeah. 100%. And so my co-founder was really interested in this idea. Why is some things more rich? Why do we get writer's block? Why, when you go to write something, it just takes so long? Like, what is the process when you're writing a script or a story? Why does it work sometimes? Why does Breaking Bad it's so brilliant from a story point of view? And then Netflix tries to get paid for something else to be made and it just doesn't land? Why was the Game of Thrones so amazing when it was completely based off A.R. Martin's work? I might need to re-record his name again. But from the book material, when the amazing writers tried to write the last series, it didn't have that tension. And so that's where Athelia was born. We created a model that actually can understand that and treat story as a system. And yeah.
This is such a segue, but The Pit, right? I'm not sure. I feel like you'd be watching The Pit because you're a doctor. So this is a whole new format, right? In that every episode is every hour, yet there's no really experience with writing that way as such for a series. So the character development, and you can see they're struggling with it in season 2. There's a few things that have really come up for me. I'm like, okay, so much depth in these characters, yet they've really only known each other for, they've literally only been at work for a day or whatever, and so much is going on, yet you feel like you've known them for months. But then also they're struggling with, they're sort of overfeeding the audience. They're over explaining as well things that, we get it, we can pick this up on our own. How does Othelia, I guess, first of all, what is it? And if we're using, the pit as a reference, I'd love you to talk to that a little.
How wonderful, yes. And also, I'm not a doctor. I studied medical science and producer, but I then worked as a dramaturg. So I love dramaturging, and you totally nailed the pit. I am obsessed with the pit. The narrative structure of it, I think, is really excellent. The first series, ability to create tension and to build tension over time, but also have all these mini stories was really successful. And I agree that the story that in the second series had challenges, which because I have built Othelia and because we have Othelia and got to think about it, we can tell you why that happens. So what Othelia is a platform that treats story like a model. And while everyone's kind of wanting to become an AI platform, we always joke that we're just trying to be better than paper, because what people don't realize is that the pit was probably written on the equivalent of paper, so word processor and post-it notes in a room. And it was really just enough kind of technology or writing tools for the writers to come up with ideas and structure it. But what happens is once you make a whole lot of decisions about a show and you go on to the next season, like how do you decide what to do, what not to do, what creates the tension? There's all these layers to the story, and we've got to, as humans, hold it in our heads, and that's actually really challenging. So what Athelia does magically, when it was at the best of times, is you're able to put all of your story material in to Athelia. And what it does is it doesn't just hold the words, it holds the relationships between the words and all the connections. So when you make a change to one part of the story, a character, a plot line, a beat, an action, it will understand the consequences of that and how that relates to the rest of the story. So instead of having to hold it in your brain and between the group, which has a lot of, we worked out is why there's a lot of, like coming story lag or, feelings like it's just not working anymore, by creating a platform where it holds all of your decisions and you can see your story differently, you can play with it differently. It creates a lot of creative opportunity, but also maximizes the success of the story. So in that way, Athelia is a intelligent platform that centers creativity and allows the creatives to get on with the bit they like, but also helps them make sure that it's the story that they want. So we're working with studios and producers and writers who are putting in their script or their entire franchise of material, like films and TV shows, books, scripts, and they can quickly navigate the world, understand what they want to build next, and do that in real time.
And keep track of characters' lives and who's died. Like they needed this on And Just Like That, right? Like you hear about all the things that went wrong on, I didn't watch the Sex and the City show, And Just Like That. Yep. But they were saying that someone had died, but then they brought them back in a later episode, but they'd obviously forgotten that character had died. And it's like, yes, exactly. Sorry, Kat, I jumped in, but it sounds
I mean, I've got so many questions, but I think that people will be interested. Obviously, there's a lot of jobs in doing that second season. Like I used to write backstories for the Science Fiction Channel in London on exploring that person so they could write a second season. And obviously there's heaps of controversy around this because of those kinds of roles. How do you think this kind of disruption and this kind of technology is going to be onboarded or accepted by our industries?
Do you mean Athelia or do you mean...
Athelia. Well, Athelia, and I'm sure obviously you're going to have other technologies that pop up, to compete with you as well. And I think they're going to pop up more and more. But obviously there's a lot of pushback in the industry because it is essentially doing a better job of the people in the back room that used to have those jobs in that kind of space to get it to the next season?
Well, so at the moment, those people still have those jobs. Athelia has not at the moment replaced any roles. What has happened, and this is, I think, more a broader industry conversation, because that doesn't mean there's huge disruption. There's layoffs happening across, which started before AI was kind of rolling out into the workflows. But currently, Athelia doesn't replace any of the work. What we find is people given more time, a creative will take that up, focusing on writing that information. But the economics of creation is very interesting, because while studios might say, great, we can make things cheaper and not employ as many people, at the same time, indie writers or up and coming writers and directors will be able to write quicker, write better, make things cheaper. So what does that mean? If you can make your first feature film for $1 million or $2 million or $3 million, not 5 or 10 with inflation, does that greenlight your film quicker? So I think we are definitely at a point where there are a whole list of skills that are coming into question, and people still need them. My hope is that the skills that stay are the creative, connecting, collaborating skills that create rich content, and that the skills that are up for disruption and innovation are the ones around efficiency.
Yeah.
But this is exactly the conversation that everyone is having. And what we know is a lot of the creatives and the writers and everyone is using AI. If they're not doing it officially, everyone is trying it. And as that you might have heard that saying, AI is not going to replace your jobs, but people who know how to use these new tools probably will fit the job descriptions better coming. That's for sure.
That's such a good answer, Kate.
I was like, we so deeply empathize with how disruption happens and the anxiety. We've been we've been sitting at, I guess, the table for quite a few years now. Before we even made the platform, we did some work in the studios, and writers sat us down before the strikes happened and said, you can't take away the fun bit. Don't do this. When we realized we'd created something that could help model very quickly and get rid of writer's block, we were very upset when we thought people were going to be so excited, and we had some amazing writers that we really respect sit down and say, don't get rid of the fun stuff. This is about human creativity. And so since that point, we have been obsessed and passionate about creating technology that enhances it, not takes it away. We're only one ship in the sea, and there's a huge tidal wave of disruption and technology and agendas and economic shifting that is taking place. So yeah, it's a pretty exciting and fascinating time.
In my head right now, it feels like, and tell me if this is correct or incorrect, but it feels like almost like a family tree diagram or a map, and it's holding all of that information and of characters, of their individual stories, of the plot lines as you're going through each season. It feels like almost like just a huge resource for as you're creating, which, yes, like you said, is otherwise stuck up in the writer's room on Post-it notes and stuff, and it gets lost, things get missed. So it's proofing your work, right? So that you can go in, and anytime when you're writing, it's alleviating that stress of having to remember or think back or sift through. It's not actually writing or prompting you the way AI does, because that's what I find frustrating when I'm trying to write. Anytime I have gone to use AI, even when you just ask it quite simply just to do something which isn't writing the work, it always goes on and tries to suggest or change what you've written. And that's where I find it not helpful. So yeah, am I right in that's how it works?
Yeah. So at the moment, and like we're this is a podcast and, you know, we're trying to describe a product that ideally you want to see and play with. But there's kind of 3 steps to our product that you can say broadly, and then lots of detail in between. But it's anything in, anything out, and play with your story intelligently and in real time when you're in Athelia. So anything in, first of all, pull up all of your scripts. If you've got a book that you're adapting, pull up the book. If you've got video that you've already shot a whole lot of video, or you have a TV series, pull that up. What it does is it reviews it, it pulls out the characters, the storylines, the scenes, and it turns it into a big interconnected kind of data, you know, real-time data, story data. Now, how do you then play with that? Well, you know, what if you could talk to it like you could ChatGPT, but it didn't come up with suggestions from the ether? What if you could talk to it and say, hey, look, could you come up with some alternate endings? Like, what would be some alternate endings based on what I've written? What if I change this bit? And it can look at it and say, well, if you change this bit, and it lights up all the elements of your story, this character, this scene, this beat, you have to consider that. Why don't you have a think about it? Great, I'll do that. Actually, I want to collaborate with someone else. I'll send this story or invite them to have a look at it. What do you think of this character? If we do this and change it, it could affect this storyline. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, let's put it in. You update it, and Athelia understands that you've made that change. It can't change it. You have to change it. You decide on it, but it helps navigate the information narratively. And it's only working and focusing on your data. So one big issue with large language models like ChatGPT and Claude, as you probably across, is the fact that they have ingested and scraped and trained on pretty much every piece of literary and cultural and story IP in the world without paying royalties, without acknowledging copyright. And we can't do that. If we want writers to create new work and we want it to, you know, to be able to work and talk to their story and find different things, not just kind of shuffle through paper and actually like work with it in real time, we can't use language models that train and scrape, because then the work you have in there can't have copyright. You can't prove you have copyright to it. So we have a safe environment. It's encrypted. No one can get in. So you have that. And then the last one is anything out. So I put in a book. I now want to make a TV show. So great. I'll help you make a TV show. Actually, I want to make, a lot of people are into, you know, micro dramas at the moment. So a lot of the producers have TV shows from, you know, maybe a decade ago, and they want to turn it into micro dramas and push it to TikTok. That is not creative work. Working out structurally what to keep and what not to and put it together is something that a real-time system can help them do. Imagine, so also plugging into workflows that you have as well. So feeding that information to pre-production crews, being able to quickly update something once you get notes, or there's a problem on location. There's so many different applications when you have real-time story data that start to apply not just to film or television, but possibly gaming, creative content,
any stories,
the economy.
Yeah.
So that's how our product works. Put anything in, create anything out of that data, any format, and in the meantime, be able to explore it intelligently and collaborate with other people.
It's so incredible. You must be so proud. Do you think, you spoke briefly about indie, it creates now, your product creates opportunity for, indie filmmakers to come up through the ranks quicker. Do you think it will change who gets to create a product like this, or just how that creation's going to happen?
Look, I would love to say that it's our product that's helping indies. What I meant to say with that is that what is happening in the industry with AI and intelligent technology and disruption with products so you've got large language models that like ChatGPT that you can play with, and you can, from a story point of view, and change the story and the language there. But you've also got products like Runway and Midjourney and Moon Valley, who are creating image engines where you can, and Sora until it, stopped. Sora
Disney
a few
were
weeks
out.
ago.
Wasn't it the whole big Disney deal that sort of stopped that
Yeah,
in action.
yeah. There's $1 billion apparently flying around that no longer is being paid to soar at all. So I'd like to say that it is Athelia that's doing that. But what's actually happening are three things in the industry that mean that indies might be able to, this might be like a new renaissance and a golden age. The first thing is that the content creator economy is now, YouTube is now the #1 television platform, and it's making more money than any other TV platform.
Yeah.
And the top earners of YouTube, like the Mr. Beasts, are making more money than Tom Cruise per year. So let's look at the economics of entertainment. It's not, I'd love it to be Athelia, but it is like, #1, the content economy is coming, the content creator economy. For $70 million, every $70 million spent in Hollywood, there's about 100 hours made, 1,000 hours are made in YouTube. The YouTube, and on top of that, Netflix, and you don't have to buy the content. YouTube doesn't, pay the producers. The producers make it at their own risk and then make money from it. So first of all, you've got that happening. Then you've got the addition of AI. So these are tools that are making things more efficient. So you're right. All of a sudden, there might be someone who used to be a story wrangler or a researcher, no longer needed. However, there are all these other AI tools that mean that they could actually probably make that feature film they wanted. They could do it for a third of the cost, and they could put it on YouTube, and they could become the next biggest star. So what's happening is that the money going into this content creator economy is disrupting Hollywood's economic model. Agents are starting to sign up the Mr. Beasts and these people who have got followers, have got audiences. Unlike Tom Cruise, he doesn't have, millions of subscribers that you can push content to. So first of all, that's happening. Second, you then add this catalyst of these AI tools that make things more efficient and reduce the cost of making high production value. That is the opportunity for indie filmmakers. Anyone who has got incredible stories, and there are lots of collectives actually starting up of young new filmmakers and storytellers who are using these tools and now have opportunities that we never saw before. So
it's like that.
Those are the two
The
things.
Bollywood. I mean, even that wasn't it. That huge. I forget what his name is. The huge actor in Bollywood, and he, instead of putting his film to the cinema, he put it on YouTube and made way more money than what
he charged $1 per to view it. It was like, and he opted to do that because he knew he'd make more money that way.
Yeah. Which is,
I mean, but I guess this is like having just watched Louis Theroux's new doco, the Manosphere one. It's scary because
it is,
anyone can be a content creator, and I feel like you've just spoken to the narrative systems, which was where I was about to go. But how do we then maintain the quality of storytelling?
Yeah.
I mean,
which is something that obviously Athelia is very passionate about maintaining. So how is it possible, or is it just not possible, to maintain that quality of storytelling across platforms like YouTube? Or is it just different?
So is your thinking that the quality of YouTube, it might be making a lot of money, but your kind of sense is that the quality of the storytelling is not as rich as Hollywood? Is that
not
right?
so much YouTube.
So there's obviously a lot of governance and policies around getting your storytelling onto a platform, a traditional platform, i.e. ABC, SBS, or even kind of with the Netflix in Australia. YouTube, there's obviously not any governance, or there is some, but there's not a lot of governance around, or policies around, pulling your story from an AI source. And so what kind of impact do you think that's going to have on storytelling and creatives telling stories?
At the moment, are you talking about the AI slop phenomena? Like what people are talking about, where like if you open Instagram now or you open YouTube, you'll be looking at things and there'll be someone talking about, the Iran war or their opinions, or there might be a drama, and you look closer and it's actually AI images, and the narrative has probably been made by a ChatGPT engine, like it's come up with the story, and then the voice has been AI, and then all of a sudden you're watching it, and then you see it very in small writing, this has been made by machines. It pretty much says this has been completely made by AI. Is that kind of what you're thinking of when you think of?
I think that's more obvious. If I wanted to create a web series and I was putting it up on YouTube and all the writing and the creative came from, I put my idea into ChatGPT and came up with the story arc and storyline fully off ChatGPT. So not so much the slop, more of that grey kind of area where it is your idea, but you've put your idea into a platform and it's spat out something and it's kind of come, because it's hard to track IP and it's obviously pulled from a bunch of stories across the world kind of thing to create that story for you kind of thing. So more, not so much the very obvious slop, but the things that people are still creating, but the whole creative has come from, or not the whole creative because obviously the idea, but has come from them, but then they've built the whole thing out using AI.
So the two factors that I think about with that question are the quality of the content and being able to make better stories cheaper, and will that the quality be affected? And the other is actually having the right and the ownership of that content. So to have the right and the ownership of that content, you need to make it with tools that you can prove you own the copyright to. The big issue with AI tools at the moment is that they are we call it unfair trained. It's not fair trained, and therefore the guilds and the copyright kind of regulation doesn't recognize any content made at the moment with tools that you can't prove that everything is your work. Now, the way that they dealt with that in the music industry in the last 10 years on YouTube, when people were putting music that were owned by other artists and remixing, was they created technology that identified that, pulled it down, or licensing deals were done between YouTube and those entities. So that's going to be happening. That's what Hollywood does. Hollywood is coming and making sure that the tools, you are able to make money from the tools. More importantly, they're able to make money, and the technology, while the technology stops people, it has created tools that don't have copyright. Trust me, there are platforms and tools that are coming for storytellers that enable you to make money, because it doesn't mean a thing if it don't go ka-ching. If the entertainment industry is not going to give up the entertainment economy. It's show business, not just show. So in that way, I think that at the moment, it's everyone's incentive to be able to make more content that you can make money out of. That, and an example of that is a production called Has Been Hotel that was launched on YouTube, got a huge following, and an animation studio in Hollywood picked it up and Amazon Studios bought it. And then it won awards and it was fantastic, and it made money for both the creators and also the studio and also the animation company. So had they not owned that content, they wouldn't be able to do that. They would not be able to use some of the tools right now to create that television show. And had they done that and made that animation with some of these AI tools, they probably wouldn't get that deal. So I think the entertainment economy is still an economy that everyone is trying to fit into this new tech disruption. But then you also asked, Kat, how, what happens what about the story quality? Well, that's really up for grabs, I think. A good story is a good story. And what makes you choose some shows on Netflix over others? What makes us talk about The Pit? Why is The Pit so compelling and makes people want to engage with it? That's really, I think, up to the humans and the creatives. I like the idea that we leave that to creativity, but we just make sure that our ecosystem, the creative economy, is set up in such a way that incentivizes people to create and keep going. So I think that's a macro question about how do you ensure that people are being good storytellers and get chances to do that. Now, if you're a 15-year-old who is into stories and is able to, post and create new content and create a following, I swear they could be fantastic. They could be an amazing writer by the time they're 25. That's 10 years experience, but also the ability to edit and to produce. So it's a very interesting conversation, but I don't know that I don't know that first of all, everyone wants to make money. So everyone's going to make sure that that copyright is possible in some way. And the other part of that is that may the best story win. That I hope that all stories get an opportunity to find an audience. And then there's actually a third thing that we didn't consider in that. There are incredible storytellers that are used to writing in word processors and don't know how to write in these new formats, but God, they have the ability to write great stories. And wouldn't it be amazing to have tools that allow them to not have to worry about changing the format, but just focus on the good storytelling, on the characters, on the story arcs, on the themes, on the zeitgeist of it. Their tools kind of support them to find audiences. So I think you've got kind of the yin and the yang of it. You've got these new formats and platforms that are coming, but you've also got the opportunity for writers who've only trained in script writing to now reach new audiences and to now connect in new formats as well.
What advice would you give to just say that 15-year-old that's starting to go on this journey of creating content or storytelling and how to make sure, I guess, that they're not compromising their IP and, have those opportunities to be able to have their story kind of taken on a journey or be bought? Would you say don't use ChatGPT at all because of the rules around that in terms of buying up shows? So what kind of advice would you give to them on going on that AI journey?
I think the same two factors again apply to the fabulous 15-year-old female student who has got some amazing new content or amazing story ideas that they want to make. One is make sure that you can get paid for what you're making, but more important. But as importantly, jump in there and get as much experience as possible. So when I used to work in the theatre, I created a company called Arts Radar with a fellow producer. And what we were doing was supporting the up-and-coming writers and directors to put on what's called co-op theatre. And you only made money if you made money from the tickets and the box office. But what it gave the up-and-coming directors and writers a chance to do was to practice their craft, to create productions and put it in front of an audience. And these audiences were famous theatre companies like Belvoir and Griffin. And if it was a hit, then those performers and those directors and writers got a chance then to have more work and paid work. So there was a cultural capital that they learnt as well as paid. And when those programs were closed down, I would argue that a whole next generation didn't happen. The generation that I worked with are some of the most famous writers and directors in the world at the moment. And so there's two things that I think that you give the advice to the 15-year-old. It's please get in there and use as many of the tools and practice your craft as much as possible. Don't worry about whether you own it or you're making money, in the same way that those performers probably didn't make any money, if not maybe a couple of $100 from it. But they learnt their craft and they became extremely incredible story performers and storytellers. So I think you've got to tread the boards, and that was something people did for hundreds of years that I noted when I worked in the opera in Europe. So learning your craft is really important. And so they need to learn their craft. Let the industry work out how to make money out of it. They're really, really good at that. And that's where you get an agent and there's representation there. But if we can also create an economy with this new technology where people can make money out of their content and that amazing content rises to the top, that's something we're all working towards at the moment.
I love that advice.
Kate, looking ahead, I guess in the next 10 years, what excites you about the possibilities with this technology and the way stories are created?
Oh, I think, talking about, I'll say the 15-year-old female storyteller that's kind of got amazing ideas and wants to connect with and loves connecting with an audience. I think it's around that. I think that, that we have a chance to greenlight and create opportunities and enhance creativity with these tools, enhance collaboration, and that really excites me. There's no reason why we shouldn't have a renaissance of creativity taking place with these tools that are coming. Yeah. And that's my hope. My hope is that we come up with new visions and stories that we can find audiences for and connect with them, which is, I guess, the same thing as we've been doing for, centuries. And it's now a new way of doing it.
Yeah. And just quickly, where can people find for obviously there's quite a few different levels of customers or for Othelia. There's the individual writers, there's production companies, there's, agencies. So where can they find it and start using it?
Yeah, sure. So if anyone wants to become a part of our beta program, at the moment we're working with the studios. Our head office is in Los Angeles and we're working with studios and large franchise material. But if anyone wants to be a part of our, I guess, prosumer program, we are inviting everyone to our beta. So if you go to Athelia, you'll be able to sign up to our beta and we'll be able to share our program there and you can play with it. You can give us feedback on what you like, what you want changed, and be a part of the first cohort who get to play with real-time story technology.
Incredible.
When are you launching? When are you going to do the official launch?
The official prosumer launch?
Yeah.
That's a good question. We launched our beta last year at TechCrunch. And I don't know if you might have seen in the press, we were invited to do our pitch at TechCrunch last year. So we kind of launched there. But what we did was, I don't know if you've seen the television show Silicon Valley. It's about tech startups and tech bros. And we asked one of the lead actors from that show to come and do our pitch for us because there's a very famous scene in that TV show where they actually pitch at TechCrunch. And we thought, wouldn't it be meta if we, in our pitch, and that went down a treat. And all the startup founders at TechCrunch just lost it. They got so excited that actor was there. He loved it as well. And he came and met everyone. And we ended up on the front page of TechCrunch. So, using that kind of example of the power of story and story plus technology. So we launched last year with that and we got an amazing amount of betas to help us, but we've been focusing on the studios at the moment. And so, yeah, we might launch again once we release our full product, but please sign up and be a part of the beta. We'd love you to start trying to work on your stories in there.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Kate. I feel like we definitely need a follow-up.
Yeah.
Part 2 of this because I feel like we could speak to you. We skipped whole parts of questions.
So much to talk about.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Amazing.
So that's it for this episode of Femmebot, the podcast powering women in tech. If you liked what you heard, hit subscribe and share.